Good morning. Welcome to Stoddard County, Missouri. And we're going to see what all is going on here in Stoddard County as far as historical markers go. I know there's going to be a vast amount of Civil War information. So especially if you are a Civil War buff, you're going to really want to watch this county. And there's lots of other stuff here too. I'm really excited about it. So stay tuned and see us at the end. Let us know what you think. Comment. We'd like to know.
This marker right outside the courthouse is for Major Amos Stoddard. On August 10th, 1821, the territory of Missouri became the 24th state of the United States. In 1829, the Missouri legislature set boundaries for a new county to be named after Major Amos Stoddard, a distinguished officer of the United States Army. Amos Stoddard was born in Woodbury, Connecticut on October 26, 1762, the son of a farmer who was a veteran of the French and Indian War, and in the early part of the American Revolution. In 1777, upon the father's early return home from the war, his eldest son Amos joined the American Army as a private. Thus began a career in which this soldier would witness many of the young country's most historic moments. His first duty was on the Hudson River at Fort West Point, while here he observed Major General Benedict Arnold fleeing arrest when his plot to turn West Point over to the British was discovered. Afterwards, he stood close by and watched the hanging of Arnold's counterpart, the British spy Major John Andre. Following these incidents, his unit campaigned into Virginia and took part in the siege and surrender at Yorktown on October 20th, 1781. Following his discharge, he returned to his father's home, now in Massachusetts, and took employment as an assistant clerk of the Massachusetts Supreme Court and began the study of law. This was interrupted in late 1786 and early 1787 when he served as a junior officer in suppressing an uprising in Massachusetts known as Shays' Rebellion. After being admitted to the Massachusetts bar and serving a term in that state's legislature, he returned to military duty and was commissioned a captain of artillery and engineering. In 1803, the year of the Louisiana Purchase, Captain Stoddard was stationed on the American frontier at Fort Kaskaskia, Illinois, on the Mississippi River. On the 28th of November, the Lewis and Clark expedition visited the fort where Captain Stoddard supplied them with additional soldiers and gunpowder for their historic exploration. Stoddard became involved with the new territory when in February 1804 he received a commission as the first civil commandant of Upper Louisiana and was directed to oversee the transfer of the government to Upper Louisiana Territory from Spain to France and then to the United States. Following the instruction of President Thomas Jefferson, he made a few changes in the government and personnel, kept the peace, and was given much credit for his wise decisions. Relieved from his duty on September 30th, 1804, and assigned to duty in Lower Louisiana, he wrote about the history and geography of the Louisiana Purchases, hoping to help explain how important the purchase was to the country. In 1804, Captain Stoddard wrote his mother, "A military man never knows what to depend on. He must always be ready to move when duty calls, and to consider his time and talents as the property of the public." In 1812, the portly 50-year-old Major Amos Stoddard was directed to Northwest Ohio to command artillery under General William Henry Harrison. During the Battle of Fort Meigs, Stoddard was wounded by shrapnel and died on May 11, 1813. He was buried in an unmarked grave near his cannon, and at his request with other fallen soldiers. This marker just outside the courthouse here in Stoddard County talks about the Civil War in Bloomfield. There's a lot of good information here. It's very difficult to read. There's lots of tears in it, so I'm not going to try to read the whole thing, but I'll zoom in and scan over this It shows a map of the Bloomfield area where the Henry Miller home was, where we are currently standing, and a few pictures of some other people. And then we have the Bloomfield Mutiny in the lower right-hand corner down here. The 6th Missouri Cavalry Regiment commanded the post of Bloomfield, and during his assignment, Montgomery associated freely with the local populace and eventually married Martha Owen Walker, a Confederate sympathizer. So, lots of good information here.
All right, we are outside the Stoddard County Courthouse in Bloomfield, Missouri, and this is the execution of Asa V. Ladd. Shortly after 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, October 29, 1864, 6 Confederate prisoners of war were taken from their cell in the Gratiot Street Prison in St. Louis and executed by a military firing squad. This was by order of Federal Major General William S. Rosecrans at the urging of the controversial Brigadier General Thomas Ewing Jr., who had issued Order Number 11 in western Missouri. The execution was in retaliation for the deaths of Major James Wilson and 6 of his enlisted men from the 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry on the Union side, who were executed by Confederate soldiers of the 15th Missouri Cavalry, Confederate States of America, under command of Colonel Timothy Reeves. The Confederates had likewise acted in retaliation for atrocities committed by the 3rd Missouri State Militia soldiers in Ripley County, Missouri. The 6 rebel soldiers learned of their intended execution a few short hours before they faced a firing squad. Visited by Union chaplains, 5 of the men were baptized. However, one, Asa Ladd, was already a member of the Methodist Church. Private Asa V. Ladd joined the Confederate service on May 5, 1862 in Bloomfield. He joined Captain Joseph J. Miller's Company A of Burbridge's 4th Missouri Cavalry Regiment, CSA, with many of his friends from the Bloomfield community. In the short time remaining to him, Private Ladd wrote the following letter to his wife and family, and it's on the other side. St. Louis, Missouri, October 29, 1864. Dear wife and children, I take my pen with trembling hand to inform you that I have to be shot between 2 and 4 o'clock this evening. I have but few hours to remain in this unfriendly world. There is 6 of us sentenced to die in room of 6 Union soldiers that was shot by Reeves's men. My dear wife, don't grieve for me. I want you to meet me in heaven. I want you to teach the children piety so that they may meet me at the right hand of God. I can't tell you my feelings, but you can form some idea of my feelings when you hear of my fate. I don't want you to let this bear on your mind any more than you can help, for you are now left to take care of my dear children. Tell them to remember their dear father. I want you to go back to the old place and try to make a support for you and the children. I want you to tell all my friends that I have gone home to rest. I want you to go to Mr. Connor and tell him to assist you in winding up your businesses. If he is not there, get Mr. Cleveland. If you don't get this letter before St. Francis River gets up, you had better stay there until you can make a crop and you can go in the dry season. It is now 4:30 p.m. I must bring my letter to a close, leaving you in the hands of God. I send you my best love and respects in the hour of death. Kiss all the children for me. You need have no uneasiness about my future state, for my faith is well founded and I fear no evil. God is my refuge and hiding place. Goodbye, Amy, from A.C. Ladd. All right, we're outside the Stoddard County Courthouse in Bloomfield, Missouri, and we're here for this marker of the death of Captain Tom Walker. Early Saturday morning, January 5th, 1863, two farmers followed a team of oxen along the Bloomfield Road in Stoddard County, Missouri. Suddenly, a tall man stepped out into the middle of the road and stopped to face them. In a strong and determined voice, he stated, "You tell those men in town that if they want me to come after me, my name is Tom Walker." These were Civil War times, and Tom Walker had been the commander of Company C, a part of the 12th Missouri State Cavalry Militia on the Union side. Walker had been the strong and respected leader of his company, but had recently been accused by his commanding officer, Captain Lindsey Murdoch of Dallas, Marble Hill, Missouri, of accepting bribes from Confederate sympathizers. Angered by the accusation, Walker resigned his command and returned to his home near Bloomfield and challenged any man to come after him. On this day in January of 1863, his challenge was answered. 50 armed Confederate soldiers came after him. Walker may have fired the first shot, killing Captain Reuben Barnes, the leader of the armed group. Walker was immediately hit by a shot to his forehead, falling dead a short distance from the home of his parents, the Reverend and Mrs. Sanders Walker. His beautiful young wife, Lavina Kitchen Walker, quickly ran to him and hugged his lifeless body. Thus it was written, "Such was the end of Captain Tom Walker." This marker is for Stoddard Countyans aboard the CS Arkansas. In 1861, President Abraham Lincoln requested General Winfield Scott to submit a plan to suppress the outbreak of the Civil War and reunite the Union. Scott devised the Anaconda Plan to blockade southern ports and control the southward flowing rivers. The Confederacy sought to counter this with the construction of ironclad rams which could keep southern rivers open. One such vessel was the Arkansas, a ram constructed on the Yazoo River just north of Vicksburg. As the Arkansas neared completion in June of 1862, commanding officer Lieutenant Isaac Brown sought to build a crew of 100 sailors and 100 artillerymen. As the day of launching approached, 126 field artillerymen from Jeff Thompson's Missouri State Guard arrived to help man the cannons. For 2 days, the Missourians drilled and practiced on the larger and unfamiliar naval guns. On Saturday, July 12, 1862, 64 of the Missourians were selected to board the ironclad and sent into action against the Union fleet. 3 youngsters from Stoddard County were among the ranks of these new Navy cannoneers: Josiah Doughty, Smith Minton, and his 17-year-old brother Stephen Minton. Doughty and Smith Minton survived the first engagement, but young Stephen Minton did not. He was beheaded by a cannonball. His body fell onto the deck, and that officer immediately directed the nearest cannoneer, "Throw that body overboard." A shocked Smith Minton replied, "I can't, sir, that's my brother." Okay, we are outside the Stoddard County Courthouse in Bloomfield, Missouri, and this markers on the side of the courthouse. It says it was the site of a 570-foot by 225-foot wooden fort built April 1865 around the courthouse square.
The first Stars and Stripes. On Saturday, November 2nd, 1861, Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant directed Colonel Richard J. Oglesby of the 8th Illinois Infantry Regiment to move from Birds Point, Missouri, to destroy Brigadier General Jeff Thompson's Confederate forces in Stoddard County, Missouri. On the following Tuesday, Oglesby started for Bloomfield, the county seat of Stoddard County, with 2,200 men from the 8th, 11th, 18th, and 29th Illinois regiments. They had to cross a 7-mile wide swamp that one soldier described as covered with black moss 4 inches deep and so thick that 'tis like a carpet. That was an awful gloomy road, and I was glad enough to land at a nice clean stream and have orders to pitch tents. Oglesby's force arrived in Bloomfield around 9 a.m. on Friday, November 8th, to find that Thompson's forces had moved south. That evening, 10 Union soldiers entered the abandoned Bloomfield Herald newspaper office, and according to Captain Daniel H. Brush of the 18th Illinois Regiment, some printers belonging to our Regd and others have taken possession of the printing office and design publishing a paper tonight. By morning of November 9th, 1861, the Stars and Stripes was in print and being distributed to Union soldiers in the town. There were only a few copies printed, and no doubt the word was, "Read it and pass it on to a buddy." The first Stars and Stripes who acted to print this first issue: Private Benson T. Atherton of Fairfield, Illinois, wounded at Fort Donelson, Tennessee. First Lieutenant John H. Barton of Anna, Illinois, the only officer in the group soon discharged due to general disabilities and failing eyesight. Private James T. Bozeman of Carmi, Illinois, later transferred to the regimental band. Private Charles M. Edwards of Shawneetown, Illinois, wounded at Fort Donelson, Tennessee. Corporal Theodore Edmondson of Fairfield, Illinois, later detailed as a hospital nurse. Sergeant Major Otis P. Martin of Peoria, Illinois, assigned to take charge of the government printing office in Jackson, Tennessee in July of 1862. Private Walter A. Rue of Carmi, Illinois, discharged after Fort Donelson, Tennessee. Sergeant John W. Shell of Fairfield, Illinois, wounded and taken prisoner of Vicksburg, later farmed in Alabama and served as a wagon master in the Spanish-American War. Sergeant Robert F. Stewart of Carmi, Illinois. He became ill at Fort Donelson, Tennessee, and never regained his health, losing most of his eyesight. And Private Thomas Walsh of Peoria, Illinois, wounded in Fort Donelson, Tennessee, and suffered sunstroke in the siege of Vicksburg, but remained with his unit until July 30th, 1864. On November 9th, 2011, the 150th anniversary of the first printing of the Stars and Stripes in Bloomfield, Missouri, the words used by U.S. General of the Army George C. Marshall to describe the newspaper as printed in the first World War II issue from London, England, still ring true. It represents the free thought and free expression of a free people. And we've actually done several videos related to Anna, Carmi, Shawneetown. We haven't gotten to some of these other towns in Illinois yet, but interesting to reference areas closer to home from areas that are a little farther away from home. This marker is outside the First Baptist Church in Bloomfield, called Mutiny in Bloomfield. On Thursday morning, October 22nd, 1863, citizens of Bloomfield were puzzled by early morning activity around the Union military headquarters. The battalion's 4 armed cavalry companies with 2 artillery pieces were drawn up in front of the headquarters, then in the former home of physician Thomas W. McDonnell, a Virginian and Southern sympathizer. McDonnell's son, William, was serving as a bugler on the staff of the Confederate General John S. Marmaduke. The house had been seized by Union forces and used at various times as a hospital, headquarters, and post office. A telegraph office was recently added. A mutiny was taking place. The officers of the 2nd Battalion of the 6th Cavalry Regiment of Missouri Volunteers believed that their commanding officer, Major Samuel Montgomery, supported by his son, Captain Richard H. Montgomery, and the battalion surgeon, Lieutenant Thomas W. Johnson, intended to turn the post office over to Confederate forces, and they decided to arrest the major and take control of the post. Although they respected their hard-fighting, duty-first, rough-speaking major, they did not agree with the actions. He had ridiculed his superiors and permitted rebel soldiers to return to the area without trial or posting of bond. Of great concern was the affection of widowed 52-year-old Montgomery demonstrated for Martha Owen Walker, a young widowed schoolteacher from a prominent Bloomfield family. A few loyal Union people remaining in the area accused Mrs. Walker of being a Confederate spy and courier. When the major showed little concern about rumors of an approaching Confederate force, 5 Union officers arrested Montgomery and took control of the post office. They refused to obey this order to dismiss the troops, and as he was being escorted into headquarters, they took control of the telegraph operator and his machine. Major Montgomery met alone with Captain William Crockett, the senior officer of the mutineers, and after a few minutes the captain dismissed the assembled troops and ordered them back to their barracks. District headquarters was informed of the situation and dispatched Lieutenant Colonel H.M. Miller to Bloomfield to take control of the situation. He arrived, arrested 4 of the 5 officers, and reported the situation quiet and orderly, with no Confederate forces in the area. Hiller's official report concluded with the statement that, "I can learn of nothing having been done that would justify the officers in this course they took. They acted very sillily." 4 of the 5 officers were court-martialed and dismissed from service. The 5th officer and chief instigator of the mutiny, Lieutenant Reber, deserted and resigned his commission. 4 days prior to the mutiny, Major Montgomery and Martha Owen Walker were married. Following the war, Montgomery returned to Bloomfield and served as mayor, member of the school board, and as a county judge. He lived in Bloomfield to his death and was buried among his friends in Bloomfield Cemetery. On May 17, 1864, the governor of Missouri was notified by President Abraham Lincoln that the sentences of J. H. Paintner, William H. Crockett, E. J. Burroughs, and Luther Potter were dismissed and that they were eligible to be recommissioned into the U.S. Army, but none of the 4 ever rejoined the military.
All right, we are in Bloomfield, Missouri. This marker is for the Civil War hospitals of Bloomfield. The strategic location of Bloomfield on the high ground of Crowley's Ridge made it an important crossroads during the Civil War. Both Union and Confederate forces contested for control of the region. The small community changed hands more than 23 times during the war. Both armies sought to use existing businesses and homes as hospitals for the sick and wounded. The large home of Major Henry Bedford, a prominent Bloomfield attorney with Confederate sympathies, was seized by Union troops in early 1862 and converted to a hospital. A description of the home stated that the building and site are admirably adapted to the purpose for which they are used. Extensive grounds around filled with shrubbery and marked by gravel walks, arbors, shade trees, and a well of excellent water, all conducive to the beauty and comfort of the place. Union Surgeon Lieutenant Thomas E. Johnson was in charge of the Bedford Hospital and was credited with providing excellent care for the sick and wounded. Dr. Johnson evidently spent much time in the Bedford household as he married Miss Laura Robinson, Major Bedford's stepdaughter, in October of 1863. Miss Robinson was a Confederate sympathizer, possibly a spy. Following the war, Dr. Johnson lived and practiced medicine here for many years. We're going to the other side. The first hospital in Bloomfield was probably in the New School Academy on Missouri Street. Prior to General Jeff Thompson's 1861 attack on Fredericktown, he directed that the facility be prepared to care for military casualties. A large structure on the corner of Shawnee and Spring has been traditionally described as a Civil War hospital. This was the home of the prosperous merchant North Jones, a strong supporter of the Union. When the war began, he moved to Cape Girardeau, where he died a short time later. His widow, Sarah Christie Jones, returned to Bloomfield and made the home available as a hospital. Several Union grave sites are said to exist on the property. Near the end of the war, Union physician Dr. Cyrus T. Kimmel occupied a large house on the corner of Center and Spring that had earlier served as Union headquarters. It was reported that he had the house scoured out and converted to a hospital. On the first day in the facility, he is said to have vaccinated 40 Union soldiers and cared for 2 wounded cavalrymen. Dr. Kimmel boarded at the nearby home of Mrs. Sarah Christie Jones and became a favorite of the Bloomfield community as he provided medical care to civilian families as well as military patients. General Davidson's cavalry. In June of 1863, Brigadier General John W. Davidson received orders to take command of the newly formed 1st Cavalry Division, Department of Missouri, United States. The division consisted of 6,000 cavalrymen, thousands of horses, 16 pieces of field artillery, and numerous supply wagons. The soldiers came from Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, and far-off Colorado. Their mission was to join Union infantrymen in east central Arkansas and move west into the state's interior to capture the Confederate stronghold of Little Rock. This large force moved from Missouri's Arcadia Valley to assume control of Crowley's Ridge in southeast Missouri and northeast Arkansas. This ridge had the only all-weather road through the huge swamps and wetlands of the area. Bloomfield was the largest and most prominent Missouri town on the ridge. When Davidson's command reached Bloomfield, they discovered the town of approximately 1,100 people to be nearly deserted. A Union soldier wrote in his diary, "Bloomfield was once a very pretty town, but since the war has been totally demolished." Actually, the academy, the courthouse, and a few businesses and homes remained at that time. Later, everything except the academy was torched by bushwhackers during Price's raid in the fall of 1864. For 12 days, and we're walking around to the other side, for 12 days, General Davidson held his troops here, waiting for reports from hired spies regarding road conditions and the strength of Confederate forces between Bloomfield and Little Rock. The troops were kept busy with drill, picket duty, drill, foraging parties, drill, digging and erecting fortifications, dress parades, and more drill. His orders were that no soldier could enter a private home or take private property unless ordered to do so. Soldiers found little to take, indicating that Bloomfield residents were subsisting mainly upon cornmeal and bacon. A few soldiers reported that they found a few chickens, some butter, and a few vegetables. At dress parade on July 18th, the men of Davidson's command were told to strike their tents and prepare to move south at 8 a.m. on July 19th. The men seemed happy to leave the area after camping so long in the July heat of southeast Missouri. It is safe to assume that the residents of Bloomfield were pleased to see the 6,000 Union soldiers and their horses leave. A consequence of the occupation of the community by General John Blackjack Davidson and his large force was that the 1864 gardens of Bloomfield were said to be the most productive in history. Well, you know, people gotta poop. There you go. I'm gonna just pan over here. Look at this really cool cabin and amphitheater down there. And there's a covered little walking bridge over there. I just think that's pretty cool. Very, very pretty. Well, okay, guys, that was Stoddard County, Missouri, and I hope you learned as much as I did. Lots of Civil War information, but it very well done. There was a few things that I was kind of wondering where they were going with this, but I really did enjoy doing Stoddard County, and I hope you did too. And stay tuned for more historical markers. We're going to keep on going.